Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
The last safety meeting of the year. I know everybody's so sad. They don't have to sit and listen. We're almost done with school. June 3rd is our last day for Geneva. We're almost there. So, accidents. Last year, we had 14 total accidents, 12 of which were preventable, 2 non-preventable. It's a lot of accidents in 1 year. This year, we had 3 total accidents. So kudos to you guys. Significantly better, one of which wasn't even our driver's fault. It was a coach backing a white activity bus into a car. So you guys only had 2 accidents this year. That's so far. We still have a little less than a month to go.
Hang in there.
So let's end it strong. But that says a lot considering we travel to 11 in-district buildings, 18 out-of-district buildings, not including the 9 buildings we go to for the 12 plus program. So in total, on a regular basis, you guys are putting on 359,000 miles. Wow. And we only had 2 accidents in all of that. That's pretty dang good.
That's real good.
Important dates to remember. Our last early dismissal is Friday, May 16th. It's our last one for the year. Geneva High School Finals. This is a weird one this year. It's not all in 1 week. They are doing Thursday, May 29th with the 12:30 dismissal. Friday, May 30th for a 10:50 dismissal. And Monday, June 2nd for a 10:50 dismissal. Why they chose it to be like that, I don't know, but that's how they're doing their testing this year. They're splitting it weeks.
Did you email that to us?
Yep, we will. Yep, it'll also be, Brandon will be something out later this month about that. Kendall emails out all the important dates. Geneva's last day, like I said, is June 3rd. The high school, if you guys remember, we only do AM routes. We do not run high school PM routes. The elementary dismisses at 1:15 p.m. So they're getting out an hour early. This is the last day of school on the 3rd. Middle school lets out at 1:45 on that day. Our end of the year luncheon is going to be Wednesday, May 28th. So that's the day right before finals. Coming up to the end of the year, make sure that you guys are keeping your buses clean. Remember, you're supposed to have them swept out by the end of the year. Please do not just open your back door and sweep it out into the parking lot, garage bay. We have big garbage cans in all the bays. You've got your little garbage can that you can sweep it into. Please don't just sweep it out the back door and call it done. Make sure on your last day you're taking any personal belongings with you, and make sure you fill your bus with fuel and DEF if you have one that needs DEF. If you did not hear on the radio this morning, the propane tank is going to be down for 1 day on Wednesday the 7th. So make sure you fill up today or tomorrow and you've got enough to get through Wednesday.
Hey, Matt?
Yeah.
Are you gonna give us a list of the buses that are gonna go, so we don't have to fill those up?
I gotta look at the list look at the list first, but yeah, we'll probably leave those at a half.
Can we get rid of them?
No, we're adding more bluebirds. when International's only offering us diesel and we're trying to get away from diesel, we kind of locked into only one company. Thomas is another company, but they don't offer anything in gas or propane either. Let's see. Make sure before the last day of school, if you have any food in the refrigerator, to get it out of there. It will be thrown away, not letting any science experiments go on over the summer. So whatever you leave in there will be tossed. And make sure if you haven't, turn in your confirmation letters that you guys get from the state that you guys passed or got your permit renewed. You know, they send you the first letter that says 90 days you're going to expire. They send you a second one. Make sure you guys are bringing those in. Especially drivers that are over the summer that we got to give the physicals to early. Make sure you guys are bringing those in or letting us know that you got it cleared. Any questions on anything?
Will that parking lot be done in the fall?
Parking lot is estimated to be done at the latest by the end of June at the moment.
Sorry, Bobby.
How many parking spots is it gonna have? It doesn't look very big.
It has 98 parking spots.
Wow.
It just doesn't look big.
No, it doesn't.
Good one entrance?
Still one entrance. The county is not allowing us to add another entrance. So we'll have the one, there will be two entrances into that side parking lot, but not from Kesslinger Road. Any other questions? You wanna go over summer routes real quick?
Yeah. Okay. All right, so summer school for Geneva starts June 16th. They'll go until July 10th. If you signed up for it, I will call you in this week, Thursday and Friday, to bid on routes for the summer. If you are currently driving a route that requires summer routes, your time frame, your dates were on your bid sheet. So you got that back in August. Times may be different, so we'll go over that also later this week. I'll have you guys come in also and sign an updated one, because not all the times stay the same. Majority of them do, but some changed. If you did not fill out either of those forms, so our forms for coming back next year or our summer interest forms, if you didn't fill those out, I need those handed in. Those were due back in March. And there's a handful of you who have not handed them in yet. So I need those. Any questions on summer routes? Short, sweet, you're on call. We'll give you guys a call, email. I haven't set up the emails yet. I'll do that once I get everybody's forms. But yeah, so end of this week, I'll bid on summer routes. Does anybody need this? Okay, so I told you guys last month, I won't be talking today. This is Morgan. She's from IMRF. She's gonna be talking to you guys, so I'm gonna pass over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Exciting part, we get to talk about your IMRF benefits. So this is gonna be kind of a general overview, so whether you're new or you've been in IMRF or even if you're close to retirement, hopefully you still learn something. We're gonna talk about introducing you to IMRF first of all, so you just have a background of what it is. We'll talk about your benefits. So of course, retirement is being the one that most people think about when they think of IMRF, but you have other benefits as well that we'll cover. We're gonna talk about the pension calculation, whether you're tier 1 or tier 2, and how you're eligible for your pension. And then we'll end with the voluntary additional contribution plan. So if at any point you have questions, I do usually try to stop and ask if there's questions when we switch topics, but feel free to interrupt me. The only thing I'll ask is that if you ask a question on something we've already talked about or on the slide that we're on, sometimes we will cover a question that you might have. So that's the only thing I ask, but I don't mind being interrupted. Just to give you a brief background on IMRF. IMRF is a 401A defined benefit plan. So a defined benefit plan means that your retirement benefits are defined in advance based off of your IMRF service time and your wages with IMRF, so that you know what you're going to receive when you retire. This is different than a defined contribution plan. So if you contribute to like a 401k, 457, those are defined contribution plans and those fluctuate with the market. So again, IMRF is a defined benefit. Just a brief background on IMRF. Was created in 1941 in response to economic conditions from the Great Depression. And at that time, public employees weren't able to pay into Social Security. So So then IMRAP was formed so that there was a form of security for when members are no longer able to work. So at the time that IMRAP started, we had only about 5 employers and $5,000 in assets. Today, we have over 3,000 employers and we're about $56 billion in assets currently. Now, out of our 3,000 plus employers that we have participating, that's just our current membership rate. So we have over 181,000 active IMREF members, which would be probably everyone here today, you're currently paying into the fund. We have over 157,000 inactive members. So that means you still have your funds and your service credit on file, you're just not currently in a participating position. And then right now we have over 155,000 benefit recipients. So this number has gone up each year as more and more people are retiring. I do like to let everyone know that your employer only funds the retirement for you all. So your employer doesn't have any funding in any other employer's members. It's just for you, which is why IMREF changes your employer's rate on what they pay to IMREF every year. So we'll sit down and review all of our employers and make sure that they're paying enough to be 100% funded for their members. 100% funding is our overall goal at IMREF. Right now, we're about 98% funded as a whole. Now, if you ever wondered how your pension is actually funded, funding for your IMREF pension comes from 3 different sources. So it's what you as a member contribute, what your employer contributes on your behalf, and then IMREF's investment earnings from what we make off of those member and employer contributions. So IMREF does not receive any funding from the state of Illinois. This represents our 2024 pension dollar. And I actually think I updated the picture, so this should be 2025, so I apologize for that. But if you were collecting your pension this year, 2025, every single dollar paid to you would be broken down this way. So 11 cents or 11% being what you as the member actually contributed to your own pension, 22 cents or 22% being what your employer contributed on your behalf, and then the remaining 67% being IMREF's investment earnings. Now, funding for your pension does begin immediately when you are enrolled in IMREF, and then once you actually start receiving your pension every month, it's payable until you pass away. So no matter how long you live, you can never outlive your pension. Now, as far as what you specifically contribute, so the percentage that we all contribute is set by the Illinois Pension Code, so it cannot be changed. All regular Tier 1 and regular Tier 2 members, which should be everyone here today, we contribute 4.5% of our gross monthly earnings. Now, these are tax-deferred earnings, which means that when you go to collect your pension, it will be fully subject to federal tax. Now, as far as what your employer contributes, as we kind of talked about, this changes every year. So I don't want members to get too caught up in what is their employer contributing for them at any given moment. You probably won't know that a lot of times unless the employer actually puts that on like your pay stubs. You won't see, it's not like a 401k where you can always see exactly what your employer is matching. And the reason is, again, because we're a defined benefit, so your employer pays for all of their members. They don't have a specific amount for you until you actually go to retire. That's when we calculate that. So what I always tell members is if you're thinking about your employer rate, just keep in mind that overall, they're gonna contribute about double what you do to your pension. This is just the average of 2024 if you took our 3,000 plus employers rates and took the average of it. Now, enrollment in IMREF. I do like to talk about this because IMREF enrollment is not determined by if you're hired as a part-time or full-time employee. It's based on how many hours you're expected to work in a rolling 12-month period. So this is called an hourly standard. So every employer that joins IMREF chooses to adopt either the 600 or the 1,000 hourly standard, which would then qualify their members to be enrolled. Now, schools are a little bit different. Schools and all educational employers, they all follow the 600 hourly standard. So that means when all of you were hired for your position, that position was expected to work at least 600 hours in a year. So then you're actually required to be enrolled in IMREF. So if you're expected to meet the hours, you cannot opt out of being an IMREF. Next, I'm going to talk about your benefits. So we will start with disability and death benefits, and then we will focus on retirement. Now, if you didn't know, IMREF does offer temporary disability benefits. Now, the only qualification to partake in these is that you have at least 12 consecutive months of service credit on file with IMREF, and then you'd be eligible to partake in IMREF disability. Now, IMREF disability means that your physician has taken you out of work because you can't perform your current job. So it doesn't necessarily mean you were injured at work or any, yes?
When you say 12 consecutive, because we have a gap there, but we don't work in the summer, is that, how does that work?
We will talk about, it's called seasonal employment. So most educational or schools, they will enroll all their members as seasonal. And we'll talk about exactly what seasonal is, but that basically means that you are able to get service for the months that you're not being paid. So you should be, as long as you're enrolled as seasonal, you should have 12 consecutive months, even if you didn't work the full 12 months. You just have to work at least 6 consecutive months. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, we will talk about that again. So again, IMRF disability doesn't necessarily mean you were injured at work or it's an injury due to something that happened at work. It's anything that your physician takes you out of work for because you can't perform your job. Now, some benefits of IMRF disability is that it protects your service credit. So every month that you're on approved IMRF disability, you're earning a month of service. So by the time you go back to work, you don't have this gap. You don't have this gap between the months that you were off. So it's not going to negatively impact your pension that way. IMRF disability also protects your income. So you're not going to receive your full salary when you're on IMRF disability. It's usually about 50%. However, your full salary is being reported to IMRF. So again, it's not going to negatively impact your pension when you go back for earning those lower wages. It also protects your death benefits, as we'll talk about in the next slide what those death benefits are, but those would remain the same as well if you were on IMRF disability. So basically in IMRF's eyes, if you're on IMRF disability, it's the same as if you were still going to work. All your benefits stay the same. Now we do have a 30 calendar day waiting period with our benefits. So that means if you were taken out of work for less than 30 days, most likely not going to receive any benefits from IMRF. However, if there's even a chance that it'll be more than 30 days, you will want to reach out to us regarding disability. Our benefits would then just kick in on that 31st day. The exception to that would be if you were still being paid through your employer beyond 30 days. So, for example, IMRF does not require you to use up all of your, sick time, vacation, whatever time that you accrue. We don't require you to use that before you can go on IMRF disability, but your employer has the option to make you exhaust that. So like internally, for us, if I was still on disability, I have to exhaust all my time. So if I had enough time and it put me past the 30-day waiting period, then my benefits would just kick in the day after I stopped getting paid. So you can't be getting paid through your employer and be on disability. Now, a couple things, if you were awarded Social Security disability, or let's say there was a workers' comp claim and you were awarded workers' comp, IMRF does have to reduce our benefits based on the amount that you're getting from either Social Security disability or workers' comp. However, even if you're still getting more than 50% of your salary from one of those other entities, you'll still get the minimum benefit from IMRF, which is only $10 a month, and some people laugh at that. But remember, the main advantage is that you're protecting your service credit, your income, and your death benefits. Is there any questions about disability benefits? Okay. So death benefits. Whether you are an active participating member of IMRF, whether you're inactive, or whether you're a retiree collecting your pension, there are death benefits payable upon your passing. Now, the amount of those death benefits does differ, again, based on your status, active, inactive, or retired. And if you're active, which is what we're talking about today, it also depends on how much service credit you have on file. So we'll just run through them. If you were to pass away as an active IMRF member, and you had less than 1 year of service credit on file with IMRF, what's going to be paid to your beneficiaries is everything that you paid to IMRF. Now, it would include 1 year of your salary if it was a job-related passing. Once you do have at least 1 year of service credit on file with IMRF and you passed away, what would be paid out would be all of your contributions into IMRF, any interest accrued on the account, plus 1 year of your salary. Once you become vested for your pension, which we will talk about what vested means, but basically that means you're now guaranteed this monthly pension. Once you hit that vesting requirement, there are different death benefit options that are payable. Now, the options slightly differ if you have an eligible spouse that you've named as your only primary beneficiary. So let's say you do have an eligible spouse and you've named them as your only primary beneficiary. If you pass, they would get 3 different options. They would get a one-time lump sum option, which would consist of all of your contributions to IMRF, all the interest accrued on the account, plus a year of your salary. Second option is what's called a beneficiary annuity, which is a monthly lifetime annuity, which we determine based on your contribution and interest total, and also our actuarial tables on how long we expect to pay that person out. Third option is the surviving spouse pension, which is equal to 50% of your pension if you're tier 1, 66 2/3% if you're tier 2. Now, you're never required to list a spouse as a beneficiary. However, when we do send you the beneficiary paperwork, we put on there, you will want to list your spouse if you want them to get the surviving spouse pension option. Because if you don't list your spouse, or you name them but you name somebody else to share the benefit with, your spouse loses that third option, which is the surviving spouse pension. And a lot of times that's the most lucrative option. So again, that's why we stress you might want to list them if you want them to get the most options. Now, if you don't list your spouse or you don't have one, whoever you do list will get that one-time lump sum option or that beneficiary annuity option. And I want to reiterate that you do designate your beneficiaries with IMRF directly. It's not through your employer. So usually when you're enrolled, or if you're a returning member to IMRF, we'll send you something saying, please update this. So if you don't know if yours is updated, if you have an online account, you can always check it or make changes, or go ahead and see me after. I want to make sure that we always have that information up to date. Is there any questions? Yes.
Does active mean you are currently working, or are you currently just a member of IMRF?
It means you're currently enrolled in IMRF. So you're a participating
You're
employee.
retired is what, that's my point.
Right, if you were retired collecting your IMRF pension, the death benefits are going to be different. This is if you're actively
Okay.
currently working in IMRF. Yeah. Any other questions on death benefits? Yeah.
Did you say tier 1 death benefit is 50% and 66 for tier 2?
Correct. Other questions on death benefits? Yeah, the one thing that tier 2 has over tier 1 is death benefits.
It's usually the other way around.
Yeah. And we don't really know why the pension code passed it that way. We've asked, but yeah, it's interesting that that's like the one thing that's typically higher in tier 2. So now we're going to talk about the fun part, which is retirement. How is it determined what tier you're in? So the determination of your tier is actually based on your original participation date, either with IMRF or one of our 12 reciprocal public pension systems. I will show you the list of what those systems are, but if you originally were enrolled in IMRF or in one of those other systems prior to January 1st of 2011, then you are tier 1. Now, you will always be tier 1, even if you leave IMRF and you decide to cash out what you had on file, you still get to keep your tier 1 status. Now, if your original participation date falls on or after January 1st of 2011, then you are tier 2. So how do you qualify for a pension? We'll start with tier 1. If you're tier 1, you have to have at least 8 total years of IMRF service credit to be fully vested for a pension. And again, vested, you'll hear that word a lot. That means you're now guaranteed this monthly lifetime pension no matter what. So you get your 8 years of service, and then you leave employment with IMRF. No matter how you leave employment and you never go back, you're still guaranteed that pension once you're of age. Now, the age that you can start collecting that pension is age 55. Now, keep in mind, if you are going to be collecting your pension and you're going to have less than 35 years of service, or you're under the age of 60, there is a reduction that's calculated into the pension, which is permanent. So it's 0.25% for each month that you're either shy of your 35 years of service or under the age of 60. Whichever of those two is less. So let's say I'm 59 and I have 15 years of service. Well, I'm closer to hitting the age of 60 than to hitting 35 years. And at 0.25% reduction for each month that I'm under 60, it's a 3% total reduction off my pension. Now I'm going to go over tier 2 first, and then I'll come back to the reduction aspect of it. Now, in order to qualify for a tier 2 pension, you have to have at least 10 total years of IMRF service credit. And when we say total years, that doesn't mean you have to earn your 8 or 10 years all at the same employer, or that it even has to be consecutive. So you could, work here for 6 years, and then, maybe 3 years down the road, you go to work for another school, and you finish out your vesting. It's just total time. Now, once you have your 10 years of service credit for tier 2, the earliest you can collect on that pension is age 62. Again, similar to tier 1, if you're going to be collecting your pension with less than 35 years of service credit, or you're under the age of 67, there is a reduction that's calculated into the pension. Now, tier 2's reduction is 0.5% for every month that you're either shy of the 35 years or under 67. So if I just use a similar example, let's say I'm 66 and I have 15 years of service. You know, again, I'm closer to hitting the age of 67 than to having 35 years. But at 0.5% for each month that I'm under 67, it's a 6% total reduction. Now, the couple things I want to say about the reduction is I always encourage members to run the numbers before assuming that you're stuck for 35 years or the full age. A lot of times the difference might not be quite as significant as you think it is, or even if it does seem significant, it still might not be worth it to work those extra years for you. So always run the numbers so you really know how much more you receive in your pension by getting to that unreduced either age or your service years. And if you've ever had an estimate done or you're ever going to do one in the future, all of our estimates automatically factor the reduction in if it's applicable. So you never have to do any additional math or worry about, oh, when you get to retirement, I've been, preparing for this number and now I'm getting much less because now the reduction is being factored in. It's always all factored into any estimate you receive. This is a list of those systems I mentioned. There's 13 systems in Illinois that fall under the Illinois Reciprocal Act. This is the 12 excluding IMRF. So of course, working in education, you probably recognize state teachers' retirement system, state universities' retirement is on there, state employees. If you have service with more than one system that's covered out of this Reciprocal Act, you could potentially combine your time together to receive a pension with both systems. This is called a reciprocal retirement. How do you qualify for that? You do have to have at least 1 year of service credit with another system in order to combine your time. The only exception to that is if you did work at IMRF as a teacher's aide specifically, and then you went to work for teacher's retirement system. In that case, any service that you earned as an IMRF aide would count. Other than that, you have to have at least a full year. Now, a lot of people think that if they have reciprocity, they're transferring their service all into one system. It actually all remains separate on file with each system that you earn it with until you get to retirement. Even then, it still technically remains separate because you're still getting a separate pension check each month, one from us and one from that other system. The only time it really gets combined is behind the scenes when we go to calculate your benefit with each one. Now, the main advantage of reciprocity is that you get to combine your time. So let's say that you're in tier 2, and let's say that the highest vesting requirement between us and, let's just say teacher's retirement system is 10 years. Let's say you work here for 6 years, and then you leave and you go be a teacher, and you do that for 4 years. Well, separately, you're not vested for a pension with either system, because you only had 6 with us and 4 with teacher's retirement. But together you have 10, which means you're now vested with both systems. So that's the main advantage of reciprocity. Both systems can help you get to your vesting requirement. Second advantage is that each system gets to use your highest average salary. So in that example I just used, if you did go to TRS and that salary was much higher than your IMRF salary, IMRF gets to use that higher average salary when we calculate your benefit with us. So if you have reciprocity, I always encourage members, they usually put limits on how far out they'll project an estimate for, but if you're within 5 years or you're projecting within 5 years of retirement, you can put in a request for an estimate to show what you get from each system if you did combine them together. Next, we're going to talk about what your IMRF pension is based on, which is going to be your final rate of earnings, or what we shorten to FRE, your years and months of service, and then your age at retirement. We did already talk about the age, that's just where the reduction comes into play. So before we talk about what your final rate of earnings are, let's talk about what earnings are even required to be reported to IMRF. Any regular wages for working are required to be reported. With that being said, there is a wage cap for tier 2, and I never want to assume that anybody in the audience is not meeting the wage cap, so I always read it out loud. Tier 2's wage cap this year is $127,000. So if you ever, good for you, if you get to that wage cap, any earnings you make beyond that amount are no longer reportable to IMRF. That's just what we mean by wage cap. Now, any wages you receive for sick time, vacation, back pay, if you work overtime, if you receive any bonuses for anything, all of those things are reportable to IMRF and are counted in your IMRF earnings. And earnings are reportable even up to a month after you terminate employment with IMRF. And the reason why that's important is most commonly in retirement, if you are entitled to receive a payout for any leftover time that you have, whether it's sick, vacation, you get a longevity bonus, whatever it is, a lot of employers will pay those things out the month after you retire. So it's important to remember that those wages are still reportable to IMRF and can be counted in your reportable earnings in your pension. Now the service credit that is counted towards your pension, we talked about the first couple. Of course, if you're meeting the employer's hourly standard, you're having wages reported every month, you're receiving service credit. If you're on IMRF disability, we talked about that, you're still earning service every month that you're off on approved disability. And if you're in a seasonal position, which we did already touch on a little bit, but just to clarify, you work at least 6 consecutive months in a year, you're meeting the hourly standard, and your employer has enrolled you as a seasonal employee, you're going to receive 12 months of service credit for the year. At retirement time, IMRF can convert reported unused unpaid sick days into additional service credit as well. The entire next slide is about sick time, so I will come back to that one. There's additional types of service credit that some members are eligible to purchase. So this box has most of those different types of service. You can find all of the different types on our website if you do think you might qualify for one of them. But unfortunately, you can't just buy time for the sake of getting closer to being vested. A lot of people will say, can I purchase service to get me closer? Unfortunately, no, unless you qualify for one of these different types of service. So I'm only gonna go over the 2 most common, which is probably reinstated service and omitted service. So reinstated, let's say that you do leave your IMRF employer and you do cash out what you had on file. Well, when you take a refund from IMRF, you're not only forfeiting your you're not only forfeiting your funds, but also your service credit. So if you were to go back to IMRF, you're starting from 0 with everything. So reinstated service means that you are allowed to apply to basically buy back that refund as long as you've gone back to an IMRF employer for 2 years or a reciprocal system. So after 2 years, you can apply to reinstate that refund. Omitted service credit occurs when, let's say you're hired for a position and you should qualify for IMRF enrollment, but for some reason you were not enrolled at that time. With your employer's agreement that you should have been enrolled, you can basically buy that time back to get it into your service credit history. Yeah.
I have a question. If you did a reinstatement and you originally worked for an IMRF before January 1st of 2011, does that now make you Tier 1?
Even if you don't reinstate it, you still get to keep your Tier 1 status.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all based off of your participation date, whether or not you left your funds on file. Yeah. So again, there's additional types of service credit. There's military service. If you ever served in the military, you might be eligible to convert some of that time into service credit. So I just won't go through them all just for time's sake, but on our website, like I said, you can read about any single type of past service. Now going back to the sick time, just to reiterate, IMRF is able to convert any reported unused unpaid sick days into service credit months when you retire. Now, the remittance of any unused unpaid sick days to IMRF is determined by your employer. So every employer has their own policy on what they do with your sick time when you leave employment with them. So it's important to ask your employer if you're not sure what they will do with your sick time. But if you are going to be retiring with IMRF and they do report any sick days to us, we're converting every 20 days of sick time into service credit months. So that chart up there shows just how they are accumulated. So the maximum amount of days that can be reported are 240, which would be an extra 12 months of service credit added into your pension. Now, as you can see, they are in ranges. So that means if you have anywhere from between 1 and 20 days, that will get you that month of service. So I always tell members, if you find yourself kind of in between in the range, like let's say you have 130 days, unless you think you can save up to 141 days to get you into that next bracket, you might as well use down to the minimum of the bracket that you're in. Unless, of course, your employer will pay you for those days, you might as well use them down because there's no difference between them reporting to us 130 days or 121. You essentially just be losing those 9 days. Now, a couple really important things to keep in mind with sick time. In order for IMRAP to convert any of these days into service credit at all, you have to be collecting your pension within 60 days from when you terminate employment with your IMRAP employer. So if you don't plan to be collecting your pension within 60 days from when you leave employment, any reported sick days on your behalf would be lost, because we then can't convert them, and we don't pay out for sick time either. So it's especially important if you're wondering, well, when would that ever happen? Let's say you're somebody who just plans to stick around until you become vested, and then you're not gonna be age eligible yet though, and you don't wanna continue working for IMRAP. So let's just say you're tier 1, you got your 8 years, you're 45, you're like, I'm done, don't wanna do this anymore, don't wanna go back to another IMRAP employer. Well, if your employer reports sick days for you when you leave, now you're 55 and you're going to apply for your pension. Well, it's been more than 60 days from when you left employment, so we can't now convert those sick days into service credit. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, it's very important because I hate getting that phone call or that person coming in and they're like, oh, do you have those sick days reported from way back when I worked at so-and-so employer? It's like, well, yeah, but we can't do anything with them because of that 60-day rule. And I don't think if an employer does report them, they're not doing it on purpose. They probably don't realize that, or they don't know that you might not be going back to another school, which is going to be my next point. Schools and educational employers are the only employers, as far as IMREF employers go, that can bank sick days. So this means, and this is where I don't want to confuse anyone, in the example I just gave, let's say you left here and you were only 45, but you're already vested, and you know that you're going to go to work for another school and retire from that school. So you let your employer here report your sick days. When you go to that another school and you're now retiring from that school, meaning you're going to collect your pension within 60 days when you leave that school, they report sick days for you. You get to combine those sick days with the ones that were reported from your previous school. Again, as long as you're collecting your pension from your final school within 60 days. Does that make sense to everybody? So don't let your employer report your sick days to IMRAP unless you know that you're going to go work for another school, okay? Because only schools get to bank your days. If you worked for like the village or the city or somewhere like that, and then you went to work for a school, you don't get to bank those days. It's only schools that get to bank each other. Does that make sense? Okay. The final thing I like to reiterate about sick time is that it cannot be used to meet any of the vested requirements of the IMRF. So sick time cannot be used to meet the service requirement of 8 or 10 years. It cannot make you older, and it cannot avoid any reduction in your pension. Meaning, let's say you work for 34 years, which commend you for that, it's a long time. But if you're thinking, well, I have a year's worth of sick time, so I worked 34, plus a year of sick time, I have 35, great, no reduction. Unfortunately, the pension code thought of that. You do have to work the 35 years to avoid the reduction. So you will still have that 1 year reduction in, even if you have technically 35 with a year of sick time. Then people ask, well, what's the point of me having my sick time reported? Well, we will talk about what the pension calculation, how it determines what your pension is, which is based off of your service time and your wages with IMRAP. So even though your sick time isn't helping you meet any of the vested requirements, it's still adding extra service in your pension, which is going to increase your pension amount. Okay? Is there any questions on sick time? Yeah.
Not necessarily sick time, but let's say you knew you were going to retire on January 1st. When would you start the process of receiving your pension so that you are able to get it within the 60 days?
Well, you don't have to receive your first pension payment within 60 days. It's just that, like, if you are saying, I'm done working on this date, and you don't want your pension to start right away, like you want to defer it more than 60 days, that's when the sick days don't count. It doesn't mean that if you don't get your pension within 60 days, with your first pension payment, the sick days won't count.
Okay, so generally, when would you need to apply for a pension if you knew you were retiring January 1?
About 30 days in advance.
Okay, that was
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The January 1st day too, I know like the voluntary contributions, you have to actually work the day, right? In January?
You have to work into December. Yeah, it's all based off when your pension is effective. So your
like you
pension.
have a Christmas break, and you don't come back till January 3rd, say. They backdate your pension retirement date, like with voluntary contribution, then you lose that interest for that year?
So you have to get interest in your voluntary for your final year, you have to work into the month of December. So if you work up until you leave for Christmas break and then you don't come back, you still get the interest credit payment for that year because you worked into December.
Last meeting, my 2 days said something different.
No, it's all based off when your pension is effective. So if you retire in December, whether it's the 1st of December or the 31st, pension's effective January 1, which means that your VAC deposit is still on file. So you're still getting your interest payment. So you could work, December 1st could be technically your last day. That would be the earliest you could retire and still get your interest that year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you sure about that?
positive. Absolutely positive.
That includes your sick pay or you.
Yeah, as long as you work into December, because then your funds are required to stay on deposit through the 31st, which is when we credit the interest. Other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So then, what if you retired, say, like in August, would you not get that interest for that year?
No, we don't prorate interest, so if you do contribute to the VAC, which we'll talk about, if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about it. So if you do contribute to that and you don't work at least into the month of December, you're not getting interest for that final year. Yeah. So, when people say, is there a best time to retire? Typically, no, exception being maybe if you are part of the VAC program, there might be a better time. But yeah, good question. All right, let's get into your pension calculation. So how is it determined what you're actually going to receive every month? So whether you're tier 1 or tier 2, out of all of your years of service, no matter how many years of service you have with IMRAF by the time you're going to retire, we only are going to look at your last 10 total years of service to determine your final rate of earnings. Now, if you're tier 1, we're going to look for your highest 48 consecutive months of pay over your last 10 years. Add those 48 months together, divide it by 48 to come up with your average monthly salary. If you are tier 2, we're going to look for your highest 96 consecutive months of pay over your last 10 years of service. Add those 96 months together and divide it by 96 to come up with your average monthly salary. So this is how we determine the base of your pension. So then we'll apply that average salary number to our pension formula. Now this formula is the same whether you're tier 1 or tier 2. Each of your first 15 years of IMRAF service, you receive 1 2/3% of your average salary. Each year beyond 15 years, you receive 2%. So let's say I'm retiring from IMRAF with 20 total years of service. My first 15, I'm receiving 1 2/3% of my salary. So 15 multiplied by 1 2/3 should be 25.005. Each of my remaining 5 years, I'm getting 2%. 2 times 5 being 10. 10 plus 25.005 is 35.005. So what does that mean? That means if I retire from IMRAF with 20 total years of service, I'm retiring with 35.005% of my average salary as my monthly pension. So if any of you remember, we used to mail out those or hand out those little booklets for tier 1 and tier 2. There was a chart in there that showed, for however so many years you receive this % of your pension. I do think that those were confusing to people because everyone would then think they had to work so many more years to get a certain percentage of their pension. They thought it jumped every 5 years, you get a more significant percentage of your pension. That's not how it works. It's just that if we had every single month and year of that chart, it would be a lot bigger to fit on that page. So it's important to remember that you receive service for every year and month of IMRAF service. So the example I just gave you was obviously 20 years of service gets you 35% of your salary. Well, if you only worked 19 years and 11 months, you're just retiring with 34.8% of your salary. So it goes up incrementally with every single month that you continue working. Okay? So I want that, people always ask, they think there's magic numbers or magic dates, and there's not. Unless your employer has certain incentives for getting to a certain number of years or to a certain date, IMRAF does not have anything like that. So the only time you'll ever see that your pension might be going up a little bit higher is, according to this graph, I can even prove it to you, is once you get past your first 15 years of service, because now you're getting 2% for every year instead of 1 2/3%. So there's no spike in which if I just got into X amount of years, my pension would have been so much higher. Just that once you pass 15, it goes up at a little bit of a steeper rate for each year. The maximum FRE you can retire with is 75%, and that's with 40 years of IMRF service credit. So 40 years is completely maxed out your IMRF pension.
That'd be Josh.
Yeah. And then you should make that long.
All the rest of us would be dead.
Any questions on the pension calculation? All right, this is my favorite part. Is anybody here not heard of voluntary additional contribution plan? I'm assuming everybody here has heard of it then, because I didn't get any shaking of the head. Okay, great. This is an additional savings plan that you can open with IMRF. The more that we go out to employers and we do these presentations, the more we're finding that this is being underutilized and not everybody is aware that it's an option, especially when they first are enrolled. We don't want this to be a secret to anybody. We want every single person to take advantage of the VAC if they can afford to do so. So please pay attention to this part. It allows you to make additional after-tax contributions. So it's technically a separate account from your regular IMRF pension, but we'll talk about how it can potentially be a supplemental amount to your regular pension benefit. So again, this is an after-tax account, and it's based off of it's deductions from your gross monthly earnings, just like your regular pension. But remember, your regular pension is all tax deferred. So this being an after-tax account means that by the time you're gonna draw out your VAC, everything that you contributed to it, you will have already paid federal taxes on. So only portion that you will owe taxes on is going to be the interest that you accrue on it. Now, the way this account works is that every December 31st, IMRF is going to credit our current interest rate based on what you had on January 1st of that year. So for that reason, the year that you open this account, you won't receive any interest because your opening balance will have been zero since you opened it in that year. You will start receiving interest the second year. Now, IMRF's current interest rate is 7.25%. Now, we can't say that that is technically guaranteed, but I can tell you it's extremely consistent. We've only changed our interest rate once in the past 50 years. So, as you know, despite what's going on in the market currently, people always ask, is there any chance the interest rate could change? Well, there's always a chance because, again, it's not guaranteed. But the last time our interest rate changed, it wasn't even in the crash of 08. It was 2019, it went from 7.5 to 7.25, and it's been 7.25 since then. So our investments team does a really good job of ensuring that despite what's going on in the market, our interest rate remains the same so that members can rely on the consistency of it. Now, the amount that you can contribute to the VAC, also a little bit different from your regular IMRF, because remember, you're set at 4.5% for your regular pension. You can't change that. VAC, you can contribute anywhere from 1% all the way up to 10% of those gross monthly earnings. So technically combined, you can contribute up to 14.5% to IMRF, 10 to VAC, 4.5 to your regular pension. So a lot of members will ask, is there anything more I could be doing to increase my pension? Well, again, since you can't alter your contribution rate, I say you can either work longer or make more money, or you can open the VAC account. Now, just a couple visual examples, which are also available on our website, just to kind of show you the true potential of the account. We have two people that both start VAC at the same time, so they're both 25. And they're both going to contribute until they're retiring at age 67. They both earn the same annual salary of $30,500 with a 2% annual increase. Now, he contributes just 1% the entire time that he pays into this account. By the time that he's going to draw this out at retirement, his total contributions of his own money that he will have paid is $20,484. What he will have earned in interest is $83,725. Now, she sits at 5% the entire time that she pays in. By the time she's going to draw this out at retirement, her contributions to the account is $102,418. Her earnings and interest, $418,625. So that green number that they're both going to be entitled to as a lump sum payout, he's going to be at over $100,000. She'll be at over $500,000 back. They're both getting back over 5 times what they actually contributed to the account. Now, the second example just shows that two people starting slightly older, because of course, if you were even enrolled in IMRF at 25, you might not have been thinking about putting extra money aside for retirement at that time. So this just shows two people who start at age 40 and they contribute until 67, but the same percentages, 1% and 5%. they're both gonna get back almost 3 times what they paid into the account. So just keep in mind, if this is an account that you maybe are starting later than you wish that you would have, it can still be very beneficial for you. But again, hopefully, if you are starting this later in life, you can even start higher than 1 or 5%, or you can at least increase your contributions more frequently to make out even better than these 2 people did. And keep in mind, 5% is only half of what you can contribute. Remember, the maximum is 10. So imagine, on the previous slide and even on this slide, what that would be at if they contributed the maximum. Now, like any savings, yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, as far as beneficiary goes, if you turn around and you put into it, okay, I put into it, say, the voluntary for 20 years, something happens to me, do I have to specifically say my wife can have it, she gets a percentage, or she can resist it and take a lump sum? What happens in that case as far as the voluntary ones go?
Good question. So if you're actively participating in IMRAP and you passed away and you contributed to VAC, it would, again, it depends who you have listed. So if you did have your spouse listed as your only primary beneficiary, they would get those 3 options for your regular pension, assuming that you're vested. And then for the VAC, it's a little bit different. They don't get like a percentage monthly of it. It kind of depends how much you have in there. So if there was enough in your VAC account for them to pay a monthly annuity, your spouse might get that option to take either just the lump sum or the monthly. If there wasn't enough to make a monthly annuity out of it, they would just get the entire lump sum of contributions and interest of your
It would be
VAC.
your choice to do that.
If there was enough to pay an annuity, there would be a choice, yes. Like any savings account, the VAC works best if you contribute to it, increase it when you can. Best way to do that is every year you get a salary increase your VAC, you won't miss it, and then to not touch it and let it grow. But we do have to let you know that you are able to borrow against the VAC if you ever needed to. So with your regular IMRAP, you can't touch those contributions until you're no longer working at an IMRAP employer. The VAC you are able to borrow against even if you are still working at your employer. So the only couple stipulations with that is that you do have to take your full balance out. You can't unfortunately take a partial refund. And since it's all since it's all after tax, you will just get the full balance. So you're not necessarily penalized for taking a refund. Your interest stays on file until you are no longer working with IMRAP. So that your interest can still continue earning interest. Now, another stipulation is if you do take a VAC refund, you know how I said that our interest rate is based on your credit at December 31st, but it's based on what you had in your account on January 1st. Well, the exception is if you take a refund at any point throughout that year of your VAC, then when we go to credit interest that year on your account, you're only getting interest credited on the interest that you had. You don't get it on the full balance because you took a withdrawal. But again, if you did need, things happen, things come up, and you needed to take that money out, you do have that option. Now, if you do leave your VAC on file until you are going to collect your pension, and those example slides, of course, we went over the lump sum number that they're entitled to. But if you have accumulated at least $4,500 in your VAC account and you're going to go to retire, you might have an option to, instead of taking the lump sum, have us pay you an additional monthly annuity. So this is going to be an additional monthly payment that is also payable for the rest of your life, just like your pension. So when I mentioned earlier that this could be a great way to supplement your retirement, especially if we were talking about the reductions and you were thinking, well, great, guess I'm working until 67 or 60 or working 35 years, but you don't want to and you don't want to take the hit in your pension. VAC is a great way to supplement that so that you can make up for some of that reduction that you might be in your pension and even more. Now, if you do decide to take a lump sum payment instead of a monthly annuity, remember all of your contributions are after tax, but the interest is still tax deferred. So you would receive a form asking if you wanted to roll over the interest into another qualifying retirement account. And if it's a tax deferred retirement account, like a traditional IRA, 401k, 457, something like that, then that interest portion will remain tax deferred as a rollover. Otherwise, if you just want us to pay you an interest payment directly, we're taking 20% off for federal taxes. I like to include this slide at the end just because, of course, the entire presentation is about becoming vested for IMRAP pension and taking advantage of your IMRAP benefits. But what if you don't become vested? So if at any point you find yourself leaving an IMRF employer and you're not vested for a pension, and you know that you're never gonna go back to an IMRF employer or a reciprocal system to finish out your vesting, you do have the option to take a refund of what you contributed to IMRF. Now, you won't get paid out on any employer contributions or any interest, but you'll at least be able to get back everything that you paid in. And remember, your regular IMRF contributions are all tax deferred. So if you wanted to keep them tax deferred, you didn't want to pay the taxes up front, you would have to roll the entire amount into another qualifying tax deferred retirement account. Now, I do like to reiterate to members, please think twice, even 3 times, 4 times before taking a refund. I have at least one person every time I go out to an employer that comes up to me and says, I left IMRF, took a refund because I never thought I would come back to IMRF, and here I am back at IMRF, how do I pay that back? Which at least you do have the option to pay it back, but you're basically paying us everything that you took out plus the compounding 7.25% interest. So it can be kind of expensive. So that's why we always say, think twice about it if you think there's even a chance. Or remember, there's 12 other systems in Illinois that you can potentially combine your time with. So that's a lot of employers that you might be able to work for to be able to still get vested. But of course, it's your money, so if you need it, you can take it once you're no longer working in any capacity for IMRF. So just to recap, introduction to IMRF, talking about your benefits. So just remember about disability and death benefits as well as your retirement. Talking about the calculation, so whether you're tier 1 or tier 2, what makes you eligible. And then please, if you can afford to do the BAC, just at least look into it. I know there's a lot of retirement accounts out there that you can contribute to. And if you can do them all, you can't save enough, but just please at least look into it as an option because it really can be very beneficial. I've never had somebody say they regretted making BAC contributions. So, any questions from anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, so what's the update on your systems as far as the office goes? Like if we have to call, because it seemed to be for a long time, it was really hard to call and actually get somebody on the phone.
What's the best way
Still
to
is.
reach out?
I will be
What's
honest.
the best way to reach out?
Is that still an ongoing issue or has that been resolved?
It's still hard to get through to us. I will say it's getting a little bit better because we've hired a lot more people, and so we just got our first, I don't want to say batch of people, but our first group of people have finally been trained, so that's helping a lot in the mornings. Because if you call a lot of times first thing in the morning, it's typically a little bit easier and you'll get the callback option, and now there's even more people on that shift.
Okay.
So I do anticipate it'll continue to get better because of more and more people in training. The other thing I tell members is if you have your online account set up and it's not an urgent question that you have, we have this secure message portal where you can ask a question electronically and get a response. Other times, if it is an urgent question and you can't get a hold of somebody, you can drive to the Oak Brook office, or you can even have your employer reach out to us and say, I have this member, they're retiring now, and they need to get a hold of somebody. That would be my suggestion.
So if we took that option, so say we tried to call on the phone and just couldn't get through or whatever, and we're frustrated, and we're like, I'm gonna drive to Oak Brook. So you don't necessarily need an appointment, you can just walk in and hopefully someone's there.
Depending on what you are wanting. So we have people come in all the time because they can't get through. So if you wanted to sit down with somebody and have them go through your specific account, you need to have an appointment. But if you want to come in and you want somebody to print you forms, or you want to submit forms, or you have general questions, you don't need an appointment for that. Yeah.
Good enough.
Yes.
How much longer do you think we'll have to wait to get our updated docs? Like mine's still.
Your statement?
23.
Great question. They keep extending it. So every time we ask for an update, and they have started releasing them, they're putting them out in batches this year. So we were told that they were supposed to all be out by end of April, and now obviously we're into May. And I wish I could tell you definitively when they'll all be released, but I really don't know. They just tell us to keep telling people to keep checking. So I know it's frustrating. I usually tell members if you're looking for something specific, like your contributions or something that you do, or like your updated service credit, just send us a secure message and ask us to send it back to you in writing. But at least the pension estimator is up to date. So even though when you go in your online account, if it doesn't show your updated service, the estimator has your updated service.
Yeah, I tried playing around with it. It wasn't working real well for me. Trying to figure it out.
It's a little bit wonky sometimes, so you have to know, like where to enter in the information, which I could probably show you if you have a minute after.
Yeah.
If, as long as you know where to put it in, then you won't have any issues, but it's kind of confusing at first.
And then last question, you showed some, like, chart that was listed on your website, like the old web page, every time I like try to log in and Amaranth, it seems to take me to the new thing.
Are you talking about when you're trying to go to the general IMRF website or log into?
Yeah, I was, log into Amaranth, and it seems like it takes me right away to the thing with the documents and, yeah. So is there's information on the general website separate than what we are getting when we open it?
Yes, so if you're, I would just, I don't know if it's something, if you're going like on your phone, if it's, I don't know if it's like
Yeah,
a
I'm
saved
doing it on the
page.
phone usually.
But if you go to, if you open your internet browser and you just go to www.imrap.org,
Yeah.
that whole general website
It's
is, you
still
can
there.
find, yeah, it's still there and it's all
Until
pretty
you
much the
click on
same.
your benefits.
Then when you click on member login, that's when it takes you to signing into your
Okay, all right,
documents and stuff.
great, now I understand.
Yeah. Other questions? All right, well, thank you for sitting through that in the morning, I know, on a Monday morning of all.
Thank you. Nope, we're not done yet, Sid. Okay. Matt came in and updated me that the propane, they're doing that on Thursday now. So if you have a propane bus, Thursday is when the propane tank will be down. Okay? Second, I understand that last week we had a lot of issues with internet, Skyward. It's all a work in progress. It's new for everybody. Why they chose in the middle of the year, I don't know. I don't have that answer. All I can say is that you need to have patience. It will get better. It's not going to change anything. We're going to do this, whether you guys do it now or when we come back. Okay? Some things that I am pushing for, and we have changed sometimes, some places. I'm trying to boost the internet at each of the schools. I keep telling them, you made the change. This is what you want our drivers to do. Therefore, we need them to work with us. So, right now, the high school should have gotten a boost in the diagonal. Okay, so yours, I think Sue Ann, you could ask her where she was the one who tested it for him. She met the IT guy there. It was on the curve. Yes, it might have taken a minute or two, I don't know, but that's the boost they gave us. Okay, so you have to have patience. If you know that you're going to be running late, more than likely you're not going to hook up to the internet. Okay. Also, when you first log into Skyward, first thing you got to check is, are you even connected? Everybody keeps coming up to the office and throwing their phones in our faces. If you have red writing saying that you need to be on an IP, that's your first clue. Guess what? You're not on the internet. So you don't have to run to Kelly, Kendall, or I, because I'm going to tell you, are you connected? You can stare at me all you want. You're not connected. Those red IP, you're not connected. When we say close out of the window, I don't mean swipe left, whatever. You need to close it. Because if you just reopen a window that says you need to be on IP, guess what? When you open it again, it's going to say the same thing. You gotta close it out. You know how to close out your windows. Close the window completely out.
Exactly.
Re-log back in. Okay? When you're at the elementary schools, we're working on it. Okay? Chuck and I were going back and forth last week, and he didn't want to see it my way. They will see it our way because this is what they want to do. Because we can't be switching you or clocking you in the office. Okay? I put it in the email when we did that. It says it in your handbook. It's a 10-minute deduction. The only time we can switch you is if you're out of district. So if you're in McKinney, Vento, and Batavia, clearly you can't do it because guess what? Batavia doesn't have our IP address. So yes, we're going to switch you over. If you start your route at the middle school and then you should be switching over then. Okay? You may have to get out of your bus. I'm sorry. Climb down those stairs, get out of the bus, put your phone up in the air, find the signal. But you need the internet. Okay? If you don't, hold on one second. I'll get to you, okay? I promise. But if you don't have the internet, it's not going to work. Submitting every Friday. It may even start on Mondays. We may have to change that, okay? Because once you submit, Kendall, whenever she makes changes, in the past, we just always submitted it for you. Not anymore. If you get a notification saying that your timesheet was denied, guess what? It was denied. Because we made changes, that's giving you a chance to go through, review it again, and submit again. So you may get emails and calls saying you didn't submit. You'd be like, I did. You might have, but guess what? We made the changes. You wanted changes, we made the changes, now review the changes and submit again. That's why on Friday, people were like, well, my changes aren't in there. Get used to it. It's gonna bounce back. It's gonna tell you to submit again.
So you don't know how we'll be notified that we need to resubmit?
It's gonna, so, the one thing, when you guys downloaded these new apps, it said that you had to have notifications turned on. You may be having issues because you turned those notifications off. Notifications have to be on. I have mine on, and believe me, every time you submit, every time somebody denies something, I get a notification. And yes, you can find the notifications. If you go in the app, there's a little envelope, it's got a number on it, that's where you're gonna find all your notifications at. Okay, so everything is in the app. You guys are telling me that you guys can't see anything. If you go to the menu bar, those 3 lines, they're in there. So like year to date, people are like, I can't find year to date. Go to the menu bar, go to payroll, guess what? There's your year to date, okay?
So you say only time that you'll clock us in is when we're out of district. But for example, my midday, I need you to do it for me then, or do I go to the high school and do
When you
it
get to
then?
the high school, you can do it. When you get to the high
And
school.
that's okay?
You gotta be kidding me, that's gonna cost the district so much more money because of all this extra driving that we're doing and time involved, like, you can't, I'm telling you, it's well, shoot.
Okay, so here's the thing, okay? I understand what you're saying, okay, but,
Knocking your nose off to spite your face kind of thing.
okay, I get that, but how much work do you think it is for me and Kendall and the new system, having to switch you over, because it's not the same program?
Yeah,
So
but
there's
you sit
more
there,
steps for
that's-
us.
You push some things, like, we're actually having to drive and then go, like, the internet's not working, it just, I'm telling you, it's not gonna work.
Okay, so then write your discrepancy and then don't do it. If you want to work with me in the office, I will show you step by step and how it is when somebody calls over the radio and what we have to do in order for us to get you switched over. Yes?
So in other words, if I finish up my route
Mm-hmm.
and I have to go right to my field trip,
Mm-hmm.
there's nowhere to clock in.
Yeah.
So if I can't call in, then I do what?
As of right now, we were switching you guys over,
Okay.
okay? Because we know there's an internet issue. That's why the first thing I said to you is, I'm working with IT to get an internet Wi-Fi boost at each of the schools. Right now, all we've got is at high school, okay?
And it doesn't even work in high school, really.
So,
I work for me.
okay, so it works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. Sorry.
Here, are they gonna boost here?
They said they boosted it here already. So that was the main thing. They said they boosted it here already and they boosted the high school. Other locations, again, I'm working on it. Okay? All right, yes.
We have to shut every window that you have
Correct.
open on your phone, because it's a threat to the Skyward firewall. So that's probably why you're having a difficult time.
So if anybody heard Jeannie, which is true, the reason why they downloaded the authenticator is because it's authenticating the 2 apps that we use, Outlook and Skyward. Okay? So like she mentioned, as a firewall, you have to close out every window. So if you're on the bus and you're playing solitary, or you're playing some gaming devices, or if you're on your own email address or your own banking, close everything out, because yes, it is going to be, she said firewall, it's going to be a security issue that we are only using it for our programs. Okay? Also, second thing is that they all wanted, this is something I found out later, is if you don't have the Edge browser, that's another issue people have been having. I don't use the Edge browser except for on my computer. But I had to download it on my phone in order to use the apps. You may never use the Edge browser. You may never use it. But it's one of those things that, you know, Geneva IT wants everything on. So the Edge, Skyward, Authenticator, Outlook, okay? Any questions? Yes.
We're going.
All right, have a good day. Thank you.